All right. Welcome to this Q&A. Again, I want to welcome on to this Q&A. Question came in earlier about lighting candles on a yahrtzeit, right? So there's a yahrtzeit. Min in Yiddish means it's the year memorial of someone who died, right? It's a date that they died. So you commemorate it in different ways. One way is certainly, let's say, person had I don't know, anyone you have to mourn for, father, mother, sister, brother, spouse, child, God forbid. So usually, if it's a guy, then you'd be obligated to lead services, say the mourner's prayer, right? Say Kaddish. You light a memorial candle as well. Now the question is, what does lighting the candle? What did it actually do? So the Mishnah already tells us, right? Cannot use the fire of the dead. Let's say someone died and they use that candle for whatever. You can't use it for Havdalah, right? Because again, not lit for the living, but to honor the dead, right? That is brought down, and whatever, it's brought down a few places in the Gemara itself. Also, we see that Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, commanded his family to light a candle, before he died, right? The language over there is to leave a lamp lit in its place. Now, even though we normally understand it to mean talking about Shabbos lamp, let's say, some here say that is the source for lighting a candle for a departed for a departed soul. So very good. Question is why, right? What is the reason? So it's King Solomon. King Solomon says in Proverbs, chapter 20, verse 27, King Solomon says, near mitzvah Torah, right? The soul of a man is a lamp of God, right? Near mitzvah, right? The light of a candle compared to a mitzvah, and Torah is compared to the light, right? So here, the soul of man is a lamp of God. So what is the lamp of God? A candle, right? Seemingly a candle, and it's referring to a departed soul. Also, we have this comparison. Again, there are a lot of reasons why lighting a candle, which we're going to see. Also, one aspect is when a person dies, right, the soul goes out. So you have a void, right? You have this dark void, so to speak. What does candle do? It replenishes the light, so to speak. One of the commentaries says that soul derives joy from the candle's light. As it says, the light of the righteous will rejoice. What's the reason? Soul is made up of divine lights, right? It comes from God's heavenly throne. We call it the Kisei HaKavod, whatever that is. A natural delight in something that is of something similar, right? So even though the candle itself generates physical light, what's the light of the soul? Something spiritual. Also, lighting a memorial candle before Yom Kippur. That some say that we light the candle to atone for the souls that have left this world, for a person that's died, right? Because it says, for the light, honor the Lord. That is brought down in Isaiah chapter 24, verse 15. And we light a candle to honor God, right? The merit of the departed. God promised to forgive and watch over the souls. Now, we're going to go a little bit deeper, right? Just while we're speaking about this, that candle represents what? Person's connection to God, right? What the lamp itself, right? Candle, the lamp, whatever, includes the wick. What is the wick itself? The wick itself represents the body, the flame represents the soul. So when you light up a candle, both the wick and the fuel combust in a way to bring in a flame of light. So learning Torah and doing mitzvahs does what? The body's consumed by the soul, becomes spiritual energy, right? So like basically lighting this candle, right? A person made up of body and soul, right? Again, the soul compared to this flame, but it's accompanied by the body, right? When a person does a mitzvah, it's like the body lights up, right? The body seems to light up. Now, the more righteous the person, the more the person, I would say, glows. Anyone's ever seen a real righteous person? You can see in their face there's a certain light about them, right? You know, anyone's ever, if you've seen a righteous person, you see that. So this is really, this is really what it means, that Torah mitzvahs can light up a person through the soul, right? So again, even though a person made up of body and soul, the body itself consumed by the soul. So when a person does a mitzvah, it's like the body gets the benefit, that spiritual light, so to speak, and that person can glow. Right? We see by Moshe Rabbeinu when he came down from the mountain, he had to put a veil over his face because he glowed. Right? When he went up on the mountain. So too, a person, if they keep Torah mitzvahs the right way. Yeah. So by very righteous people, you can see they have a certain shine, they have a certain glow that, most people they don't necessarily have. But the righteous person, you can definitely see that. Now, you normally light a candle. So in this case of yahrtzeit, so you light the candle the night because the day starts at night. So after sundown, you'd light the candle. You would light the candle in honor of that person, honor that person that died, and then now what would happen? Let's say the yahrtzeit's on Shabbos, so you can't light the candle. You can't light the candle on Shabbos, so you have to light it before Shabbos. So what if it's not going to last? I mean, you shouldn't have a problem. You get these yahrtzeit candles or very long candles that last a long time. You get these candles that last 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it may be. But if you didn't light it before Shabbos, you can't light it, right? Even if you have a pre-existing flame on Shabbos or a festival, you won't be able to light it, right? Because now in a festival, you're allowed. If you have you're allowed to light a candle, right? If you have a pre-existing flame. So you'd be allowed to light a candle. But in this case, we say it's not shaveh l'kol nefesh. It's not equal for everybody. In other words, someone is lighting this light from this candle, whatever. Why are you lighting it? You're not lighting it for light. You're not lighting it to cook something. You're lighting it in memory of someone that has passed away. Now, that's not equal for everybody. Right? Not everyone's going to have someone that passed away on that day. Right? So whatever, there's a major difference of opinion whether a person is allowed to to kindle a light if it's already as a pre-existing flame, to kindle the light on a festival, because you're allowed, to light a light as long as it's a pre-existing flame in general on a festival. Nonetheless, since not everyone would do this, why not? Because they have someone who died. So many hold that you can't light it. In other words, if you lit it before the festival, very good. If you didn't light it before the festival, so we hold, practically speaking, you shouldn't light it. Right? In other words, the festival comes in, you shouldn't light it on that, on that time. So again, the custom, the custom is that. Now, the question is what kind of candle. So, I mean, most people probably use a wax candle. Some say, I guess, according to Kabbalah, you should use an oil lamp. I'm not exactly sure why. What do you call it? What the difference is? right? You want a pure light, obviously, but in either case, some say, according to Kabbalah, they should light from a what do you call it? Choose an oil lamp for a memorial candle. Others say use a candle, let's say made out of beeswax, because the word for beeswax is shava, right? Shava is an acronym for Kitsu Varananu Shochne Alpha, which means awaken and sing, you who dwell in the dust. What's a reference to? Obviously, someone that has passed away. Also, an allusion to time of resurrection, when we are going to be reunited with anyone who has passed away before. But let's say you didn't have either. You didn't have any candles. The only thing you had is an electrical lamp. So really, you could probably use that as well. Um, um, so that's important, right? That's what people do. But even more important, once the person dies, so that soul cannot do any more mitzvahs. Done, right? Cannot do any more mitzvahs. But the descendants of that person can learn Torah, do mitzvahs, give charity in the merit of that departed soul, and that's a tremendous merit. That is tremendous merit for the soul. What some people do is on the yahrtzeit, the date you commemorate the person that died. So there are people that will make a siyum. They'll finish, let's say, a whole order of Mishnah. They may finish a tractate of Gemara or something. They will usually finish something to make a siyum, which they're able to say the mortis prayer as well at the siyum, and they will be able to, with big merit for the soul also, learning, anytime a person is learning, let's say, they want to give the soul extra, that soul extra merit. So they would say that they're giving, that this learning is going to, for the merit of this soul. Whatever the soul is, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, whoever it is. So you can learn for the sake of the soul, you can give charity, right? Let's say, for the sake of the soul, that certainly that certainly will help. Again, and the reason is very simple, that the soul itself cannot do any mitzvahs. Soul has no mitzvahs to do because the soul is dead. Now, we say that the soul can be elevated and rise to higher spiritual levels because, let's say, they left over kids that keep Torah mitzvahs, or at least one kid that keeps Torah mitzvahs. Yeah, so that's very good, right? So they have a continuation after them. They're keeping Torah mitzvahs, so the mitzvahs that they do, they get credit for. Why? Because they gave birth to them, right? They fathered them, either way, whatever it is, right? It's a person's child. So therefore, they will get the merit of the mitzvah that they do because they are their child. Now, it goes both ways. You have a person that didn't raise a child in Torah mitzvahs, or let's say they did and the child goes off, they also pay the price, right? It goes both ways. Now, you could say, well, you can have the best parents, and educate the child in the best way, let's say in the best way possible, send them to the best schools. No guarantee how the child's going to come out, but, you give it your best shot. You try and, educate the child according, as King Solomon says in Proverbs, Hanoch lenar al pi darko, right? You should educate your child according to his way, right? Al pi darko, doesn't say al pi darki, doesn't say according to my way, meaning, let's say a person wants to, let's say they have a son, they want to send him, to this top yeshiva or whatever, but the kid's not, not holding there, right? Not academic enough or whatever to get in, but, you have connections, whatever you want to push him through. You can kill the kid in the process if he's not, not their type of place, and it's going to go too fast for them. And, you're setting them up to fail. They need to be educated the way they need to be educated, right? So even if a person, I'm not saying you educate them in secular things and just, make them a secular Jew or whatever, I'm not talking about that, but you want to give them the best chance to succeed, in keeping Torah mitzvahs. So really, of all things being equal, you send them to the best places if possible, and if they succeed, they like the system and they fit in the system, very good. Problem is, a lot of people don't necessarily fit in the system, so they have other type of schools. They go slower, they're not as pressurized. I mean, they've been learning over the years because A, not everyone learns the same. B, whatever, it's a rough, it's a rough schedule. Take a 14-year-old kid, even, before his bar mitzvah, his day starts like, prayers in the morning, like 7:30, so you got to get up early, whatever. And he's done, let's say, 6 o'clock at night. It's a long day, but, they have a lot of breaks, whatever. So it is easier in that sense. They hit high school, let's say Yeshiva Katana, they hit high school. And now they have less breaks and more learning. They go to like, 9:30 at night. It's a long day. It's not, it's very hard adjustment. Even if you like learning, it's very hard adjustment. And the reason is because you don't have so many outlets. You don't have, so much time during the day. And, then you get home, you're pretty tired. It's not, you get home, let's say 10 o'clock at night. Like, you want to unwind, but, you don't want to go to sleep too late because then it's going to be hard to get up in the morning. It's a whole vicious cycle. But it's a long day. It's not easy. Right? It's definitely not easy. Some kids like it more, some less. It takes time. It takes time to adjust. Nonetheless, you got to prepare them. So, so here in Israel, most schools are not going to have secular studies by that point. So, like, they're just focused on, learning halacha, learning Jewish law, learning, mostly learning Gemara, right? So, we've never really spoken about this, but it's not easy, right? It's, it's definitely not easy for for a lot of kids, even in the States, in strong Jewish communities, that's the way it's going to be. And the outside communities, it'll be less, it won't be, I don't think it'll be as intense in many ways, but, at the end of the day, they're going to learn these hours to be able to, know how to learn. It takes a lot of time to learn. Yeah. So, they have to be focused, but it's, it's a long day. It's a long day. So what's the point? So the point is, let's say the kid doesn't like learning. Yeah, let's say, or they're not good at it, or as we said before, the biggest problem today is, lack of self-esteem and whatever. Let's say, God forbid, they have a learning disability. Let's say, God forbid, there's stress in the house. Let's say, there could be a lot of factors where a kid does not thrive. And at some point, something's going to either, make or break. Either the kid's going to, continue to struggle, whatever. Or the kid will just say, I've had enough. I want to do something else. I mean, again, that doesn't mean you're starting off your kid that way, right? In other words, you want them to be as successful as possible. That's what you want. You want them to be as successful as possible. Okay. Right? But you got to give them the best chance for that. Now, a kid can say, I want to take things easier. I want things that go against, or okay, that's a different issue. Right? You're not educated, you say, got to educate him according to his will. Very good. Right? The object is over here is to educate them the way the Torah wants. Not, they can say, well, I want this, I want that. Well, too bad. Right? You have an obligation, a parent has an obligation. Educate them in the best way possible in Torah. Now, again, not everyone's a cookie cutter, as we said. Not everyone enjoys the system. People struggle and they have ups and downs, and sometimes a person can, God forbid, spiral out of control. And not only that, they, let's say, they become friendly with kids that are, also, not so interested in learning and, doing other things. Those are not so simple, right? Also not simple. But, at the end of the day, the parents get all the glory when they do the right thing, and they get, a lot of the pain, and punishment if not. Now, you can tell me, even from the best families, a kid could go sour. True, right? But why? Because the power of the street, power of friends, power of all kinds of things that don't necessarily have anything to do with the parents, right? You can, if a kid has a bad friend, you try and, break that friendship up and try and do other things, whatever. It's not so simple. It's definitely not so simple. A parent has to try the best of their ability to give the kid what they need. in order for them, to succeed. But there are things that, they're not in their control. Totally not in their control. At the end of the day, what can happen? So let's say the kid goes sour for different reasons, has nothing to do with the parents, zero to do with the parents. Yeah, the parents still get some of the punishments. Why? Because they're held responsible. Well, they should be or not, good, we could debate, but they're held responsible. Yeah, they brought them in this world. They didn't bring them in this world, so they could be some Joe Schmo doing, doing whatever and having, no connection to Torah mitzvahs. That's not the goal. Right? God, we talk about the laws of kashrus in the Torah. Then the Torah says, that God distinguished us from the nations, gave us the Torah, right? And distinguished us, among the nations by what we eat and the holidays we keep or whatever. But let's talk about food. Yeah, by what we eat. So God did not take us out of Egypt so Jews could eat shrimp. So Jews could eat lobster. So they could do other things, intermarry, like, 50, 60% or higher intermarriage rate. It did not take us out of Egypt for that reason, right? So the whole purpose of what we're doing is be close to him. That's the purpose. Therefore, a person's married, they have kids, they have to exemplify what the Torah says, to the best of their ability and give their kids the best chance. You got to give your kids the best chance in order to succeed. Now, based on that, I heard people curse me for years. And they'll say, we'll see what happens with your kids. I said, okay, we'll see. But I said, even if someone goes off and goes sour, yeah, at least they know what Torah is. If someone hasn't really been educated that way, or they got mixed messages and other things, and they're like, there's no possible way for them to succeed. But that's not even a comparison, right? Not even a comparison. Some people I know, they tried. They tried. They didn't do what they should have done, but they felt this is what they could have done, whatever. And all three of their kids, every last one of their kids, yeah, either married a non-Jew, either is not married, or other issues, right? So people say, see, look at them, look what happened to them. Yeah, but it's not in comparison. Yeah, why not? Because the kids never had a proper education. They never had a proper Jewish education. Now again, there is a dropout rate. I'm not saying not. There is a dropout rate. In the Orthodox community. I think it's more than one Orthodox community, but it's a dropout rate across the board. Across the board. Yeah. Now, we can argue what some of the reasons are. Okay. But I would venture to say that even if there is a dropout rate, let's say it's 10% dropout rate. Let's say. Could be higher. Let's say it's 10%. Even if it's 10% dropout rate, yeah, at least they know what Torah is. They may not like it. They may have had a bad experience. Any number of things could have happened along the way, right? A lot of different factors. Many years ago, I asked my Rabbi this question. I gave him like 7 or 8 different possibilities why a child could go off. So I said, okay, which one's right? He goes, exactly. I go, what do you mean exactly? I said, I gave you 8 reasons, so he said, any number of those reasons could happen. Yeah, so it's not foolproof. I mean, the Torah, is totally pure, but, a system's not a guarantee. It's hard, right? It's very hard. So now you have a lot of schools out there catering to kids that have difficulty, right? Because you don't want to lose them. So, you have to have certain standards. Okay, that's not really the point either. But my argument was, at least they know what Torah is. See, if they don't know what Torah is, and they were exposed to a whole hodgepodge of things, which didn't make sense, were never properly explained, and the parents didn't know what they were doing, no offense to them, but they didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't move to a religious community. So what do you expect? It's not surprising. I mean, it's very sad. 100% it's very sad. But surprising? It's not surprising, right? So again, people make the comparison. Look what happened to them. I was like, there's no comparison. There's nothing to talk about. These kids don't know what Torah. They think they might know. They may think they might know, but they don't know. They ever go to yeshiva, these boys? No. They ever see really how Shabbos should really be done? And what the laws of Shabbos are? They don't have a clue. They don't have a clue. Yeah. I mean, it's not their fault. They were never given the tools, okay? But to say, see, look what happened to them. It's very easy as a kid, even as an adult, even more, right, to see contradictions. If you say, okay, Friday night you have to stay home. They use electricity, they watch TV, they do other things. A lot of things for kids are on the weekend. They Shabbos day you can do what you want. Friday night, we stay home. Makesha. I understand they want them home. It's Friday night and blah blah blah. But the kids see. The kids say, but what's the difference? Friday night, there's some big event going on, whatever, and they can't go. It doesn't make sense, right? Logically, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So if a person does that, you can't blame the kid. The kid's got a good claim. And if you don't know what you're doing, you got to make boundaries. But if the problem is you got to send your kid to public school and other things, and even if you send them to, say to a Jewish camp and a Jewish high school, whatever, a couple classes here and there, whatever. People don't even believe in Torah mitzvahs anyway. Like you can't expect, what happens to them in the end. In other words, you can say, well, I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. We did what we could do. Okay. But that's the end result. See, that's the problem. See, if you don't jump in and you don't move to a community, in this case, that's what I told them. You got to get out and move to a community. Whatever reason, they didn't want to. This is the end result. You see a whole hodgepodge of things, totally contradictory things. Kids will see it. Kids aren't stupid. They will see it. They will notice it, and they will call them on it. And the parents don't have answers. They don't have any good answers. And they said, this is what we do. But what's the difference? Shabbos day, I can go out and do whatever I want, but Friday night I can't. Why is Friday night more holy than Saturday day? Why? So, again, it's a sad phenomenon. But when you compromise and you pick and choose, and you do what you want, that's not what Torah is. That's not what Torah is. And if you're learning from people that don't keep the mitzvahs right, don't do what they're supposed to do, they also make compromises, quote unquote. Yeah, so what do you expect? I mean, not surprising. I got this question like, wow, look what happened to them. I'm like, I'm not shocked. It's very sad, 100% very sad. It's not shocking. It's not shocking. You tell me, someone comes from, I don't know, someone comes from a Hasidic dynasty, and you have some, I don't know, you have some grandkids, this, that, some of them just don't want it. They're not interested for whatever reason. So what happened to other education? There could be other things going on. Yeah. There's a phenomenon today, just on this topic, there is a phenomenon where you can have, top students and, in yeshivas, and then sometime later just walk away. Why they walk away? Why they walk away? You say, maybe it's too much pressure. Maybe they don't internalize the message, so to speak. Maybe they're not being inspired enough. Whatever, they say, you know what, I want to change. Well, this is the way you've grown up. This is what, this is what we do. This is, not about philosophy, necessarily. It has nothing to do with philosophy, in general. Could be, they just didn't enjoy it. I know someone, a few kids, a few boys, they didn't enjoy learning. They didn't enjoy the whole thing. They stayed religious. That wasn't an option, for them, but they didn't enjoy it. They enjoyed the pressure. They didn't enjoy whatever it was. So again, it's not a perfect system. You got to work with the system because that's the only system we have, right? It's not a perfect system. Some people say, well, if you shorten the day and if you do this and you do that, okay. But the question is, you open up a Pandora's box. You open up a Pandora's box. In one Orthodox school, they have they'll have, basketball leagues, maybe hockey leagues, this, that. They don't give the kids an outlet, okay. But here they'll never do that because, let's say when they're younger, when they play soccer and this and that, a lot of the soccer games, they're on Shabbos. They're on Shabbos, so they associate, or football, they call it here. They associate that with Shabbos, so they don't want to have anything organized because of what it potentially could lead to. Yeah. So you say, okay, it's far-fetched, whatever, but kids need Owen. Yeah. But when are you going to fit it in the schedule? How are you going to fit it into the schedule? They have to learn. And there's a lot, problem is some kids feel like they're caged in. They can't do anything. Now, I have other places that learn less, they give them, some outlets, this and that. But again, you're thinking in the bigger scheme of things, unless it's just to save your kid, right? But you're thinking in the bigger scheme of things, like, what's this kid gonna, who's this kid gonna marry? Yeah. Yeah, you gotta say, like, what difference does it make? It's only 14. It's only 15, but it makes a difference. Okay, person goes to midline yeshiva, which is not, not a bad thing. They're not gonna be in let's say, top level yeshiva for whatever reason. Okay. Right? But they're in a mainstream place, whatever. So who they're gonna meet and potentially marry is very different than if they're like 2 feet out the door and they're already working and different things, they'll marry someone else. They'll marry a different type of person, what they're looking for. Okay. Right? But the trajectory, for better or for worse, it's not gonna change. The trajectory of when kids in school and where they go and this and that will determine much later on in life. Now, again, a person can say that's crazy. Why should that be? That's what it is. It doesn't mean it can't change. You could have it both ways. You could have somebody that within yeshiva cared for this, kids that struggle, let's say, but they become stronger. They become much stronger. Right? So a person like that will probably want to marry someone who also went through similar struggles, right? And different things. Yeah. If someone went to, top line yeshiva and that's where they stayed and whatever, they're gonna marry a different type of person. Right? What a different type of person, what they're looking for. Okay. But that makes a big difference. Right? It makes a big difference. So, at the end of the day, a person went to, a certain yeshiva, let's say, and it doesn't have a good name. It doesn't say such a good name. Okay, but, someone told me the other day, a certain person went to a certain place, didn't have a good name, right? Didn't necessarily have a good name, and did very well. So, like, it can go either way. Someone could go to a top place and not really be learning. Yeah. And portray themselves as something that they're not, in order to get, a prize match or whatever, and then the whole thing can unravel because they're not who they are. I heard someone, recently say, like, a few of their kids didn't necessarily fit in the system. They bounced around different places, but they got older, they want to get married, they had to be somewhere. Right? They had to be somewhere where at least they show their face, they know who they are, but they know who they are, but let's say it's much more relaxed, different things. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. Someone left yeshiva, let's say, 19, 20 years old, they're out working already, that's different. They got to marry someone different. Someone is looking for, someone is working, right? Or whatever. Right? But the problem is sometimes the person puts up a facade, which is wrong, but they put up a facade of who they are, and then the person gets married, and then like, they start getting up late, start doing other things. And like their spouse, like, what's going on? You're supposed to be this person, and they totally fooled it. I'm not saying it's gonna 100%, in that case, it's totally gonna get divorced, not necessarily, but they're expecting one thing, they got something else. Right? It's also a problem. Right? It's also a problem because they put up a facade. Now, why they put up a facade? They put up a facade for who they want to marry, for the type of person they want to marry. Yeah. And comes back to bite them. Certainly can come back to bite them. But, as we said before, there are a lot of, a person should be able to navigate the system today because of a lot of different types of schools. Cater to different types of kids. It used to be, there weren't so many schools like that. So they would try and take someone with a circle and hammer them and make them into a square, right? Try to get them in a square peg. That doesn't work today. That, maybe back in the day it worked for some people. Today it certainly doesn't work. So they have, many, many different types of schools for, for different types of kids, because they realize if they don't, then they're gonna lose people. They for sure are gonna lose people because they won't fit in the system. And what do you do when you don't fit in the system? It's hard because everything's about learning. If you don't learn, or you can't learn, yeah, it's okay. So first of all, learn a trade, whatever, But you want them to stay religious, so you have to find some sort of trajectory for them in order that they're going to stay. Okay, maybe it's not 100% within the framework, but it's a way that they're still within the system. At least they're still religious. And today what you can have is a lot of questions. I'll deal with them, but today, kids are not just going to stick it out. Kids are made out of silly putty. Yeah, any little thing can bother them, and people don't want to work. People do not want to work. They don't want to struggle. They want to have everything easy, but it comes with a price. Like my Rabbi said, he brought it down a number of times. What's the better place? Someone asked them, what's the better place to send my kid? Where they're good families, but they learn less. It's on a lower level. Or send them to a place on a much higher level, but, the kids and the families are problematic. So he said, you send them to the first place because you want them to be around, strong families, strong kids that are strong in their Judaism. Okay, so they learn less. Okay. Yeah, but the influence will be better than the other way, even if it's more, even if they cover more ground and it's more, quote unquote, academic. But again, it's not a simple thing. Every person's their own person. So if a person thrives in the system, beautiful. If they thrive in the system, it's beautiful. It works. If they don't thrive in the system, then you got to find, then you got to deal with, okay, now what do you do? You can't send them to, let's say, a mainstream place. What type of place you're going to send them to? So again, there's a lot of variety. So, probably you don't want to bounce around all that much either. Also not so simple. You go to a place, you don't know anybody there, or maybe a few people there, but like it's a whole new thing starting again. But if you have to, you have to, right? If they're miserable in the place they are, they're not going to go. Then you got to do that. So in general, in general, as we said, this is a cream, it's a cream puff. This is a cream puff generation, and with a cream puff generation, it's like, kids can just say, I want an easier life, I want this, I want that, and then, they don't want to work. They don't want to work. What are they going to do? If they go outside the system, and they will feel ostracized in different ways. Doesn't mean they can't come back. There are people that have ups and downs, but there are those yeshivas for that as well. All right, let me take some questions here. Someone says, I don't fully understand the departure of the soul. If it reincarnates, it's still here. No. Person dies. Let's make clear. Person dies. Soul goes up. Very good. The soul can be given a choice to suffer up there or get another chance to come back to this world. Yeah. So if, let's say, it wants to come back to this world, get another chance, i.e. a reincarnated soul, that means it comes back. But it left. The soul didn't stay here and just be reincarnated. The way it works is the soul gets up, goes up. The soul gets judged, let's say. And when the soul gets judged, either, it's going to get fixed up again, right? Whatever purification it's going to need. It could be the soul will be given a choice. Probably not today, because, when the person dies today, probably soul's not coming back. Probably it's the last time the soul's here in this world. So it could be, in general, it could be given a choice to come back, but the soul does not stay here and gets reincarnated. Just the opposite. The soul goes up, the soul gets judged, and if the soul merits to come back, right, it comes back, but it doesn't stay here. Right? It doesn't stay in this world. It gets reincarnated when it goes into a different body after it already gets judged. It's already after the fact, right? But it's going to be in a different body, right? So God will take that soul and put it in a different body when not while the soul's in this world. When the soul's in the spiritual world, not in this world. Top of that, these departed souls seem to have some kind of presence in this world. That's a different issue. They don't have it's not considered a presence in this world. Right? I had a dream. Someone came to me in a dream. A friend of mine died very young, came to me in a dream. So I asked my Rabbi this question. What was my merit to have this person come to me in a dream? And he said, wrong question. We said, the question is, how did that person have the merit to come to you? Not, how did you merit the soul came? The soul doesn't want to come. The soul doesn't just necessarily want to come in a person's dream. Got other things doing there. Probably. Yeah. But it doesn't mean the soul is here. It means the soul, for whatever reason, had the ability to come to a person in a dream. That's what it means. It doesn't mean the soul's still here. The soul's still in heaven. Right? How did the soul merit to come here? That's a good question. That's what my Rabbi asked. How did the soul have the merit to come to you? That's the question. But it doesn't mean the soul was here. Definitely doesn't mean that. The soul's upstairs. The soul's upstairs in heaven doing whatever it's doing. Yeah? It's not a question, oh, the soul's here and he came and told you something. No. He came for whatever reason God allowed him to come. Right? And go into someone's dream. Not that the soul's hovering over here today. Right? That's not the case. Soul's in heaven. Right? Question is, what's the merit the soul had to come to the person? That's the question. Right? That's the question. Somebody asked, Chief, the best way to keep our children on the right path. If they're a boy, yeah. It's the only way. If you're a girl, you send them to a girls' school. Right? To a Jewish girls' school. Right? That's, it's an Orthodox girls' school. That's the only way. There is no other way. There is no other way. If they can't go to yeshiva, what would be the best course? They can't go to yeshiva. Try and learn as much as possible if they want to learn, they want to learn about Judaism. But there are yeshivas for older kids. Obviously, they have to be Jewish, right? There are people, coming out of college, young adults want to come back to Judaism. There are yeshivas for them, right? There are girls' schools for them, right, as well. For non-Jews, it's more of a problem because there are no, everything's more or less virtual. There are no schools really set up for them, which is kind of a problem. I mean, I think it is a problem, and it is something on my horizon at some point. Trying to set up different communities for that, but you need schools for them. Yeah, you don't want to send them to public school, right? You can homeschool them, but you want them to be in the in the right environment. Homeschooling. For yeshiva education, you could do that also, but they won't take non-Jews, right? But that is one of the things on my horizon. And the other problem is someone points out, yeah. So what if a single parent? What if the other parent has influence? That's also a problem. Yeah, that is the problem. So if they're underage, one parent does not want them to go to that type of school. It's going to be very hard to do that. Going to be, you have to have really the consent of both, probably, right? But if they're past over the age of 18, then they don't have to listen. They don't really have an obligation to listen to the other parent, but the other parent can have influence. But if a person's in the right environment, then that influence shouldn't matter that much. If they're in the right environment, it's not so simple. But that shouldn't matter. Even if a person, I'll give an example. Person, let's say, they decide to go to yeshiva later. Parents are very much against it, whatever, okay. Parents can be against it, they can't say anything. They're going to say how they're going to pay. So what a lot of yeshivas do is they'll take people even if they can't pay, but they'll tell them once they start to work or whatever, they should definitely pay them. Or try and pay whatever they can, even if it's years later, right? Because what's their goal, right? What's their end goal? Their end goal is they want to help the person on their religious path. Now, the yeshiva has to exist, right? The mission in Pirkei Avos says in Kemach in Torah, right? If you don't have flour, you don't have Torah. I mean, if you don't have money, right, you can't support it, right? So you need to fundraise, right? There will be people that can pay or pay something very good, but they're going to have to fundraise. Right? For sure they're going to have to fundraise. But you never throw out a person because of money. Should never throw out a person because of money. And yeshivas, don't exist to make money. They're hoping they don't lose, a ton of money, right? They hope they're not in the red like forever, right? But their goals are not to make someone rich. That's a yeshiva in general. Less the girls' school, more certainly more than the girls' school. Yeshivas are an endless pit. It's a bottomless pit, and the reason is because everything costs money, right? You got to keep lights on. You got to keep the air conditioner on. You got food. Maybe you don't own the building. That's also a big expense. You're renting costs you tens of thousands of dollars, right? It's a huge expense. Very, very big expense, right? But again, it would be irresponsible. I understand they need to get paid. People need to get paid or whatever. But they're responsible to throw the kid out because they don't have money. Like, there's just no way for them to have money. Yeah. So, they'll do whatever they can to keep them. What's the reason? Because they're helping them on their spiritual journey, right? To throw them out, that's exactly what the parents want. Right? So I know a number of people like this. The finished college, they went to yeshiva. The parents didn't support them. Parents, certainly didn't support them. Yeshiva supported them. They helped them, helped to get married, whatever. They supported them. And that's what you need. That's exactly what you need. I'm not saying everyone, some people have some money to pay. They should have some money to pay, if they're older. Whatever. Whatever they can pay, they'll take them. Even if they can't pay as much. Why? What's the reason? Because they want to help them. They're helping them grow in spirituality. And the more they're in that environment, the easier it is. Oh, what happens when they have to deal with parents and family and friends? Very good. Okay, that's a problem. That for sure is a problem. But at the end of the day, you'll get the support you need. You should get the support you need. Right? No, no question. So you got to say, okay, the parents against. Very good. Parents against. Person have a backbone, so what are the parents against? Parents can say, well, he can never come home. Okay. The yeshiva's never going to throw them out. Yeah. If they have nowhere to go, they'll let them stay. Yeah, as long as they're doing what they need to do, whatever. Right? A friend of mine, stayed in yeshiva for many years till he got married. Got married late. Whatever, late 20s. Whatever. Yeah, lived in a dorm room there, whatever. Parents totally cut him off. Totally cut him off. Yeah, because he wanted to go to yeshiva. That was it. He made his decision. He had conflicts with family, for sure. Afterwards, but he did what he wanted to do. And the yeshiva helped him. All yeshivas will do that. They should do that. They're not going to throw a person out who's got nowhere to go, right? Just because of money. Yeah, they may, want them to pay something later, if they can make money or whatever, somewhere down the line, but they will save their lives, 100%. Now, does that mean interaction with family and friends and all that's going to be so easy? It's not going to be so easy. Yeah, it's not going to be so easy. They'll say you're in a cult and you've been brainwashed and blah, blah, blah. Okay. They say, you want to get married and this and that, so you pay for it. Very good. Person can get totally cut off. Yeah. And what will people do? They're going to let this person, starve, not be able to get married? No. They'll raise the money to get the person married. They do it all the time. All the time. Yeah. Whatever. Again, I go on a phone call. People are willing to help these type of mitzvahs, big mitzvah. I had someone converted. They had no money for tefillin. Father had no money for tefillin. Within 1 hour, 2 hours, they raised the money for tefillin. Right after conversion. They raised the money. It's not, there's plenty of Jewish money out there. It's not a problem. Yeah. So I made a few phone calls, this, that, boom, took care of it. Yeah. Okay, getting married is a much bigger expense. You're right. Much bigger expense. Yeah, but whatever. They can make, they can do it on a shoestring budget. Yeah, they have to raise the money. And there'll be people that will do it. There are plenty of people that do it. Yeah. It's a huge mitzvah to do. They have no one else to help them. No one else. What do you do with widows, orphans? Orphans, let's say they have no parents. Or let's say they have one parent, but, let's say, they have a mother, father died, they have no money. They have to raise the money. There are people that'll help them. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, But people will help them. Yeah, I've seen it more and more. That's the way it should be. That's the way for sure it should be. Someone asked, just total different topic here. What does it mean Torah mitzvahs with Shema that you don't get reward? Well, Shema means for its own sake. For its own sake means that you're doing it because the only reason you're doing it is because God said to do it. That's it. That's the only reason you're doing it. Right? No reward. You're doing it you're doing it for the sake of not getting any reward. That's why you're doing it. Is God more merciful than being angry? um, well, if you look at the Torah and you look at Tanakh, there are many times that Jewish people go through hardship, tremendous hardship. Pogroms, being thrown out of countries, Holocaust. You could look at it and say, well, there's a lot of pain. You want to be a Jew? There's a lot of pain. If you read the end of the book of Leviticus and the end of the book of Deuteronomy, all about the curses. Yeah? All about the curses. Now, is Torah only about, I'm going to fry now forever? Is that the majority of the Torah? No. Majority of the Torah is you do what God says. And there's reward and punishment. Right? We have to love the Lord your God, no matter what happens. It's all about love. It should be more about love than about punishment. But there's punishment. Right? Regardless, there are some people out there who say, no, God loves everyone. That's a lie. Right? That is an absolute lie. Because what does King David say? King David's a prophet, yeah? What does King David say in Tehillim, in the book of Psalms? I love you, I love those that love you. I fight against those that hate you. That means God does not love everyone. It's very clear God does not love everyone. Torah makes that clear. There are evil people. God loves evil people. God feels bad when he has to punish them. I've spoken about that. He definitely feels bad when he has to punish them. But he loves people that spit in his face and that are never going to return? No. He wants them to repent. Very good. If they don't, he'll punish them. He'll punish them anyway, either in this world or the next world. Yeah? But Torah's all about what I should do, what my obligations are, and if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, right? So then there's payback. Now, God says I'm a vengeful God. Very good. So it seems like a lot of times people getting whacked around in different things. Okay, but, that's only because people do the wrong thing. What happens when they do the right thing? So you're drawing close to God. God wants you to draw close, right? He wants you to be more close. Now, some people will pick and choose and say, see, I got 50 verses or 100 verses, let's say. You got the curses at the end of Deuteronomy. You got 100 verses, 98 verses of curses. That looks pretty bad. That looks pretty bad. Yeah, and let's say you got 50, 60 verses, in the book of Leviticus. I don't know how many verses there are, however many there are. Let's say there are 50 curses there. So now let's say I got 145 curses. Yeah? 145 curses. How many verses are there in the Torah? Thousands. Thousands. Now, why those verses there? To keep a person in check, to say, listen, if you do certain things, there's going to be payback. The rest of the Torah is not about, we're going to kill this one, kill that one, kill the other one. I mean, there is reward and punishment. That's clear. That's great Shabbos, death penalty. Okay. So Torah speaks a lot about Shabbos. Very good. Yeah. So some people will say it's all negative. It's all negative. And if you believe it's all negative, it's all about pain, why is anyone going to keep Torah mitzvahs? If you look at it in that way. Because what's the person going to say? The person's going to say very simple, you know what? I'm damned anyway. No matter what I do, it's not going to be good enough. I'm going to get punished. I'm going to find out forever. There's no point. Well, you're right. If you look at it that way, that's what's going to happen. Now, does God love the person that sins? No. Does he want them to repent? Yes. But what's the most important thing that a person should do? Try. That's what God wants to see. He wants to see that you try. But can't you get punishment for that since you didn't reach your potential? Sure. We can always make it negative. It's very easy to make it negative. Right? And some people say, well, if you read the Torah, this one's going to get killed and that one's going to get killed, and it's all negative. Well, read it. It's not all negative. Some of it is negative. Okay. Some of it's negative because of a reward and punishment. The punishment could be absolutely severe, right? Right? But you have the attribute of mercy. If you didn't have the, well, let's put it this way. If you wouldn't have the attribute of mercy, if we were only living according to God's attribute of justice, guess what? You wouldn't even be here. I wouldn't be here. Nobody would be here. It'd be good. You wouldn't have to listen to me. Yeah. Nobody would be here. The world cannot exist on divine judgment alone. Right? God wanted to create the world with only divine justice. He saw the world will not be able to stand up to that, so he created it with divine mercy also. Right? So you say divine justice is very strong. People suffer and there are all kinds of, quote unquote, natural catastrophes and people die and there are hurricanes and this and that. Very good. Yeah? Yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot of, serious things going on in the world. Okay. But guess what? If there wasn't mercy, we wouldn't be here. Nobody would be here. Right? So it's not really a fair question. Well, what's more? What's more? God has, more mercy or more judgment? More judgment. There is judgment, no question. There is no question. But if it wouldn't be mercy, nobody would be here. Right? So you have to say God's more merciful. Even if we don't understand it and we don't see it or whatever, God's definitely more merciful. Right? In that sense. Someone asks, will a Jew be allowed to say Happy New Year to his non-Jewish friends or colleagues? Well, then he can say Happy New Year. Yeah. If it's December 25th, they say Merry December 25th. You can say Happy Holidays. That's all you can say. Right? That's all you can say. But New Year's, yeah, you can say Happy New Year. If it's a Jew, you can say, yeah, New Year's is on Rosh Hashanah. You want to offend them, you can say, yeah, we don't really celebrate that day. It's the New Year. The New Year is on Rosh Hashanah. I said that to people, they didn't like that. Okay. I said we don't celebrate New Year's. Now to non-Jews, you can say that. So, you say the 8th day. The first day was his bris, was JC's circumcision, and it's born December 25th. And so you have 8 days, whatever. Okay. Right? You can say that's what it represents. Saying Happy New Year doesn't mean anything. To a non-Jew, you can definitely say it. Somebody asked, are we in some respects responsible for the other parent of our child for the sake of our children? No. You're not responsible for them. We are responsible for ourselves. Yeah? We 100% are responsible for ourselves. What the other person does, you can try and offset it, but that's a problem. It's a problem. Why? A person got divorced, right? Let's say. The other parent, they do certain things you don't like. Totally do things you don't like. Yeah, go against things you believe in, how they educate in different things. So what's your job? What's your job as that other as the parent now? After, let's say, a kid's been by the other parent, your job is, you're not going to slam the other parent in front of them. That's not going to be good, right? But you want to educate them in the best way possible and try and undo some of the damage the other parent has done. That's not so easy. That is definitely not so easy. Because they can do terrible things. They can do terrible things. And, there have been cases, a number of cases, where the other parent's so vindictive, they make up things, they lie, whatever, and they get the kids to turn on the other parent. And that happens. And it's painful, right? It's parent alienation, they call it. It's a horrific thing. One parent poisons the kids against the other parent. And then those kids don't have anything to do with that parent because the other parent lied, right? Totally lied. So that's very hard. That is very hard. So I know some cases where, the kids came back at some point, whatever, it was a very gradual process. But the only thing a person can do is try and undo some of the damage the other parent has done. But that's hard. Yeah, I'm not saying it's impossible, but if they're getting contradictory views and contradictory things, one parent's doing one, what do you do if one parent's, let's say, not religious anymore? These kids are still in yeshiva. Now, the other parent can totally ruin their kids or try and ruin their kids, which some have done. Others, won't stop them, won't necessarily interfere. Maybe they'll put on a show for Shabbos, even though they don't really believe in it and this and that, right? But for the sake of their kids, they'll do that. I mean, parents can be very, people can be very vindictive. Very, very vindictive, and they don't care what it does to their kids. And forget about their other spouse. Their other spouse is sure going to be affected. Kids are affected. Kids are totally affected. Yeah. So again, I would say the simple answer is that that the spouse is doing the damage. You got to try and undo that damage somehow. You know, without necessarily throwing that person under the bus, even if they deserve it, right? Because then you could get alienated from your child, and that would not be good, right? Their influence may be very strong or whatever. Say, oh look, Dad said this about you, whatever, and it just adds fuel to the fire, right? Totally adds fuel to the fire, and they can be very vindictive and poison the kid against you. So that you have to be careful, but even if that is the case, then the other parent has to try and undo the damage, if they can, if they can. It's not going to be so simple to do. Definitely not so simple to. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I wouldn't say it's so simple to do. Somebody asks, when we dream and see others in our dreams, is it in our mind or an actual visit? I mean, let's say a soul comes to you in a dream. It definitely feels real. It definitely feels like they're there, right? Even though you're unconscious. Let's say. I mean, it's not just. I mean, again, dreams don't mean anything per se, but you have someone come and they give you a message or whatever. It definitely seems real. Doesn't seem it's made up, right? So, it certainly can't be a real thing, right? It certainly can't be a real thing. It is in your mind, that's for sure, but it doesn't mean necessarily it's not real. I mean, they can certainly do that. I mean, the question is again, what's their merit, right? What's their merits, to come here and do that? But yeah, does seem very real. Definitely does seem very real. Why didn't God just give us a brain that can understand why they're suffering in the world? Why not? Why not? Because we're not God, right? Can anyone? The whole of what said at the very beginning, which no one ever learns, and the gate of God's uniqueness in the world. One thing he says over there is, and everyone else is going to agree with him. No one's going to disagree, right? And that is, no one in this world or in the spiritual world anywhere is going to understand God's essence. Yeah. So suffering in a lot of ways doesn't make any sense. In many ways, from what we see. Right? That means God runs the world the way he does. There's no possible way to understand why God does what he does. No possible way. They say, why didn't God give us a brain to do that? Because there's no possible way to do that. The brain in the body is finite. The body is finite. God is infinite. So something finite cannot understand something that's infinite. I'll give one example. God, speaks to Moses, tells Moses, you're going to do all these things, and the Jewish people will believe you, and Pharaoh won't believe you, whatever, but I'm going to send you to take out the Jewish people, whatever. So they have this whole discussion. And then he gets to the end, he's kind of dilly-dallying at some level, whatever, before he does circumcision on his son. And it says he's about to die. God says he's going to die. Yet the Torah doesn't say. The Gemara says he gets swallowed up by a couple angels. His wife actually sees what's going on. She takes a flint rock and circumcises her son. Yeah. Now, if God says you're going to take out the Jewish people, you are going to be their savior. Yeah. Why in the world is God going to kill him? It's because he dilly-dallied at the end. At the end. I mean, that's the way it looks. Yeah. Yeah. Different reasons why I didn't circumcise his kid the first thing they got there. Right? Different reasons. Doesn't matter. Does that make any sense? Doesn't make any sense. Right? The prophet himself, Isaiah says, on the Haftorah we read on the fast day. Yeah, your ways are not my ways. Your thoughts are not my thoughts. So if our thoughts are not God's thoughts, we'll never understand God's thoughts. How can you put a brain? How can you put a brain inside a body to understand it? It's impossible. Impossible. Yeah, so that is That's the reason he didn't put it in our minds. He didn't put it in our psyche for that because it's impossible, right? It's impossible to understand God at all. Yeah, nobody can understand him. So can God make a brain that's going to understand him? No, he's not going to do that. It's impossible. Right? It's impossible. We have a different New Year than 720 is Rosh Hashanah, right? That's what we said, right? But you can't say that to a non-Jew. If a non-Jew says Happy New Year, you can say Happy New Year. You can try and explain, like, listen, I'm Jewish, or I'm going to be Jewish. Our New Year is on, the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. I don't think it's going to go over so well. It might by some people. You could say that, but I wouldn't. I would just say Happy New Year, and that's it, right? They're not going to get it. Even by some Jews, if they say Happy New Year, say, well, I've said this before, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just like, yeah, you're a fanatic. Why can't you just say Happy New Year? Why did it say everything has to do with, something being Jewish? Yeah. Yeah. Why do you have to remind me Rosh Hashanah is a Jewish New Year? Because you should know you're a Jew. Yeah, again, does that go over well? No. I wouldn't say it goes over well for a Jew. I wouldn't, secular Jew would say that. I'd say, okay, I don't say Happy New Year. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Because if you're going to tell them, really according to Jewish tradition, the New Year is on Rosh Hashanah. You can say that. I'm not saying no. 100% you can say that. It's going to do anything? I don't know. Person could say that. I'm not saying not. Right? I just think, instead of getting in the conversation, which maybe we should to try and draw them closer, it could be. Some people in Cuba would say, yeah, why not? Give them a little bit of Jewish education, so what they think. Propaganda never goes to waste. Okay, could do that. I would just think it's easier just saying Happy New Year and you don't have to deal with it. Right? Right? These guys, it's good to use him and say Happy New Tax Year. Yeah. You could do that also. Right? The soul should be able to understand but it's limited in the body, right? That's what we said. But the soul, no, that's not true though. And the reason is, as infinite as the soul is, still not going to understand God. God will make clear why he did things, why he didn't do things. Yeah, when a person's outside the body. It'll be much clearer. Okay. God will show them that. Does that mean they understand every last thing that God does? God's explaining to me. God's explaining to the soul. Yeah. The soul never would have understood it. Never would have understood it. It understands it better now because now it's in the world of truth. Yeah, since it's in the world of truth, okay. But the soul's never, you can tell me the soul is infinite. Okay. The soul is infinite. It's a soul in and of itself programmed to understand God. No. God programmed to understand God. You can understand certain things. But remember, the Chosov says, and others are going to say the same thing, no one in this world or the spiritual world will ever understand God's essence. God's essence is not possible to be understood, even if the soul is infinite. Never be able to understand God's essence. So, therefore, no matter how powerful the soul is, it ain't getting there. Even Moses himself, 49 levels of understanding. Moses hit 48. So there's one level of understanding he didn't know. That's by Moses and everybody else. Everybody else not even going to come close, but that's not the point. As the prophet says, my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. What does that mean? That means you'll never understand whether you're in the body or not in the body. You'll never understand my essence. That's the point. Even if the soul is infinite, it's impossible. That means we're equal to God. We're not. We're not equal to God. Nobody's equal to God. Right? Even Moses wasn't equal to God. It's very clear. God does certain things man can't do. Plenty of things man can't do. Even as a pure soul. Someone asked how to respond to the Christian ideation of all overpowering women in sort of destructive, demeaning way. Because the Torah says women have an important role to play. If it wasn't for women, we wouldn't have come out of Egypt. Yeah? Women have a different role to play. Yeah? Not everyone's created equal. Okay, but that doesn't mean we think we're better than women. Anyone wants to take on all my obligations during the day, great. Let them take it on. They weren't created for that. That's not their purpose. Should they pray every day? Yes. Should they pray twice a day? Yes. They have to play with the minion? No. They have other mitzvahs bound by time. They're not obligated to do. So they're exempt. Yeah. So if a person's raising kids, they don't have the same obligation. If they have the same obligation, go and say, get a babysitter, do something. You got to figure it out. But you have the exact same obligation. I'm taking care of my kids. I'm too tired. I'm too this. So what? Right? They weren't made to be equal. Not a question of being, they're going to always think we're better. Not a question of thinking we're better or not. Different roles. Totally different roles. So it's like, why do women have to have the children? Well, who's supposed to have the children? Men can't do it. Right? It's impossible. Biologically. Keep this clean. Yeah. They're different roles. It's not demeaning. The feminists will say it's demeaning. The feminists will say, well, come on, it's apologetics, it's this, turn all these arguments. And, there's no difference between men and women, right? Because someone's giving a class about women in Judaism, so someone asks all these feminists, is there any difference between men and women? So all these women scream, no, there's no difference. He goes, okay, let me ask the question again. Are there any differences at all that you can think of between men and women? Women can have a child, the man can't. That's a difference. Yeah. So the argument is, if they're different physically, they're certainly different emotionally. Women don't think the same, that's for sure. Right? So if they're different physically, different emotionally, don't we think they can be different spiritually also? It's not a jump on, it's a leap of faith. Not a leap of faith. They have different roles. People say, it's demeaning. Yeah? It's demeaning. Why is it demeaning? They should have public roles. Oh, you want to know why they don't? And why it's a problem? And about modesty? And about sneers? And about this? Okay, we can have a discussion. But you can't put your 21st century idea, on and say, I think women should do this, do that, and the other thing. They have different rules. Yeah, they totally have different rules, not demeaning. They look at it as being demeaning. Yeah, they for sure look at it that way. But, we give women the utmost respect. They should have the utmost respect for everything they do. Someone will say, I heard a good answer. Someone will say, why don't we have to be barefoot barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen? Well, they don't have to be barefoot. They can wear shoes. They can wear sandals. Yeah. It is the meaning what people say, but that's not what it means. That's certainly not what it means. People say women are evil, subversive, and bad as a whole. Okay, so they're stupid. What can I do? What can you do with stupid people? Women are evil? Why are women evil? Yeah. Yet women doing the right thing, going in the right path, keeping what they need to keep and whatever, educating the children the best way, being the best role model. Why are they evil? Right? They didn't want to tell me, look what he brought to the world. He brought death to the world. She wasn't evil. She got, she got duped. Snake had a lot of powerful, things to tell her, and she fell into it. Okay, it doesn't make her evil. Well, can women be conniving? Sure. Can they do terrible things? Sure. And men can't. Men are not conniving. Men are not whatever. Guy talking here. It can also be bad. Right? It goes both ways. It doesn't just, just on women. Totally not just on women. Somebody says suffering in this world is brought on by people. That's different. Again, the question is not why suffering happens. That's not the question. Right? The question is the person going to understand the way God does it? And the answer is no. The person is never going to understand that. You can tell me because they sin and it's reincarnation and this is going to happen, that going to happen. You're right. You're 100% right. We're never going to fully understand it. We don't fully understand the measure for measure in general. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we may get it, but a lot of times we're not going to get it. Someone said, I heard from a rabbi that one prophet understood everything except the thing with the red heifer. It wasn't a prophet, it was King Solomon. Yeah, it was one of the things King Solomon had difficulty understanding. The smartest of all men. Yeah, is that true? Yes, it's true. We're not supposed to understand God. We are. We try to the best of our ability to understand what he wants from us. But again, the point is you're never going to understand his essence. Right? Try to understand what he wants from us, keeping the Torah, what we're supposed to do. Good. We can understand to the best of our ability. We have to understand it's all divine decree anyway. We still have to do it. We still have to try and understand it. Yeah, very good. Very good. But that wasn't the point. The point is God's essence will never understand. That we'll never understand. But, the red heifer, are we going to really understand it? No. You have to try, and what it represents and why we're supposed to do it and how it's supposed to be done and all that. That we have to try and understand. But the essence of what it is the ultimate law that doesn't make sense. Maybe King Solomon had difficulty understanding it. That was the point. If the truth of an non-Jewish child dies in an earthquake, he might go to heaven and fulfill his tikkun. Could be. Very well could be. Keep in mind one thing, Jew or non-Jew, if they die, does not automatically mean their soul gets fixed up. Regardless of how they die. Yeah. Now, death is an atonement. Death does atone, that's for sure. But, it's not a full atonement. So even if it could be, someone dies in a certain way, that, could that be 100% the atonement for what they got? Could be. It could be. It doesn't have to be, but it could be. Right? Death in general is an atonement, doesn't mean it's a full atonement. Or someone had to come back and go through a certain amount of suffering. Yeah, certain thing. Could that be that fixes everything? Could be. Yeah, anybody non-Jew could very well be. Right? Could very well be. Does it mean it is? No. Doesn't mean 100% it is. It could be. Right? It's definitely a possibility. Yeah, any other questions? All right, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, feel free. Find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, OrthodoxConversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos, Q&As, ethics of our fathers, book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, RabbiChaimKaufman@gmail.com, RBBI, CHIMCOFFMAN at